A gifted art student at a prestigious Roman academy discovers her portraits may trap souls. As classmates vanish, she uncovers a dark pact linking beauty to sacrifice, forcing her to confront the haunting truth behind art, memory, and obsession.
Alara Vanni's footsteps echoed softly on the ancient cobblestones as she approached the towering iron gates of the Accademia Privata d'Arte in Rome. The late afternoon sun bathed the sprawling campus in golden light, casting long shadows that danced amidst the classical statues scattered across the courtyard. Her breath caught for a moment, heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. This was the moment she had dreamed of since childhood, the beginning of her journey as a portrait artist at one of the most esteemed art academies in the world. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel, fingers brushing over the familiar grooves left by years of sketching. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, a few stray strands framing her pale, expressive face. Her muted grey coat did little to hide her slender frame, but Alara felt a quiet strength in her resolve. The bustling courtyard was alive with students, some huddled in animated conversation, others carrying canvases or sculpting tools. The air was thick with the mingled scents of turpentine, fresh clay, and aged stone. As she crossed the threshold, the grand entrance hall welcomed her with its high, vaulted ceilings and walls adorned with portraits of past masters. The heavy scent of oil paint and varnish enveloped her, a comforting reminder of the world she was entering. Ahead, a tall figure approached, his presence commanding yet enigmatic. "You must be Alara Vanni," came a smooth voice. She turned to see Professor Lucio Ferrara, the Academy's director. His impeccably tailored dark suit contrasted with his silver-streaked dark hair, and his piercing gaze seemed to look right through her. "Yes, Professor Ferrara," Alara replied, trying to steady her voice. He smiled, a gesture both warm and unsettling. "Welcome to the Academy. Here we nurture talent and challenge the boundaries of art and perception. I trust you are ready for what awaits." Alara nodded, unsure what to make of his cryptic words. As Ferrara's gaze lingered on her face, a strange shiver passed through her, quickly dismissed as nerves. Later, she was introduced to her fellow students. Among them was Sophia Moretti, whose bright auburn curls and warm smile immediately put Alara at ease. Sophia was pragmatic and fiercely loyal, qualities Alara knew she would need in this new environment. Nearby, Giulia Santoro observed them with an appraising look, competitive, ambitious, and seemingly indifferent. Alara sensed an undercurrent of rivalry already brewing. Professor Elena Russo, a graceful woman with a calm demeanor, offered Alara gentle encouragement. "Your talent is evident," she said, "but the Academy will test not just your skill, but your spirit." The first portrait session was held in a quiet, sunlit studio. Alara's subject was a fellow student, a young man with sharp features and restless eyes. The room was filled with the soft scratch of charcoal on paper and the subtle scent of linseed oil. As Alara sketched, she noticed the faintest flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, but when she glanced up, the studio was empty. Days passed swiftly. Alara immersed herself in her work, each brushstroke a delicate dance between capturing reality and evoking emotion. Her first completed portrait stood on an easel by the window, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. It was a moment of quiet triumph until she overheard whispers among the students about a missing classmate. A chill crept through her despite the golden light. She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on her art, unaware that this was only the beginning of a pattern that would soon unravel everything she believed. That night, as the Academy settled into silence, Alara lay awake, the image of her portrait vivid in her mind. The beauty she had sought to capture seemed to shimmer with a haunting life of its own, as if the shadows behind the canvas whispered secrets she was not yet ready to hear. And somewhere deep within the ancient walls, eyes watched, waiting for the next brushstroke to seal another fate. Alara Vanni had approached the easel that morning brimming with anticipation. The light streaming through the tall windows of the studio painted golden streaks across the worn wooden floor, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air. She carefully mixed her oils, selecting hues that would best capture the subtle curve of Luca's jaw and the soft shadow beneath his cheekbones. Luca, a fellow student whose quiet confidence had made him an intriguing subject, sat still with a patient smile, his dark eyes reflecting the warm Roman sun. For days, Ilara had poured herself into the portrait, every brushstroke a whispered conversation between artist and subject. She found herself obsessively sketching Luca during breaks, capturing fleeting expressions, nuances that would breathe life into the canvas. Her focus was absolute until the morning she arrived to find the studio eerily empty, the bench by the window where Luca had always sat conspicuously vacant. She asked around, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have you seen Luca?" The answers came fragmented, hesitant. "No, he hasn't been around since yesterday," murmured a student passing by. "I heard some of the others talking. He's disappeared." Ilara felt a cold shiver travel up her spine. Disappeared. The word hung in the air like a spectre. Her mind raced. Could it really be a coincidence? She glanced at the canvas where Luca's face stared back at her, vivid and alive. The portrait was finished, every detail meticulously rendered, but the man himself was gone. Rumors soon spread through the academy like wildfire. Other students whispered of similar vanishings, often linked to portraits recently completed by their artists. At first, Ilara resisted the terrifying possibility. It felt absurd, almost supernatural. But the pattern was impossible to ignore. During a late afternoon in the quiet courtyard, Ilara confided in Sofia Moretti, her closest friend since the academy term began. Sofia's auburn curls caught the sun as she listened intently, her brow furrowed in concern. "This isn't just coincidence, Sofia," Ilara said, her voice trembling. "It's like the paintings are taking them." Sofia shook her head, skeptical but visibly unsettled. "You're not imagining it. Something's wrong here." Together, they began to watch, to listen, to piece together the fragments of a mystery that seemed to creep through the academy's ancient halls like a shadow. Ilara's unease deepened during a confrontation with Professor Lucio Ferrara, the academy's charismatic yet enigmatic director. His tall figure cut a striking silhouette against the grand backdrop of his office, shelves lined with art tomes and relics. His silver-streaked hair and piercing gaze commanded attention. When Ilara voiced her concerns, Ferrara's response was measured and chilling. "The academy has always been a place of transformation, Ilara," he said smoothly. "Sometimes the cost of creation is steep, but fear will not illuminate the truth." His words offered no comfort, only a veil of secrecy that thickened the mystery. As the days slipped by, the shadow of disappearance grew longer, and Ilara found herself caught in a web of fear and fascination. Was it possible that the portraits she so carefully crafted were more than mere images? Could they hold the essence of those she painted, trapping them somewhere unseen? The studio, once a sanctuary of creation, had become a place of haunting questions. Ilara's nights were restless, haunted by fragmented dreams where painted eyes blinked and whispered secrets she could not yet understand. The academy, with its sun-dappled courtyards and marble staircases, seemed to pulse with hidden life, a beauty laced with menace. Ilara's journey was just beginning, the first brushstroke on a canvas that would reveal far darker truths than she had ever imagined. And as the sun set beyond the ancient rooftops of Rome, she knew the silence left by those who had vanished was a silence she could no longer ignore. She tightened her grip on her sketchbook, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and determination. Somewhere within these walls, the answers awaited, but to find them, Ilara would have to confront the shadows lurking behind every brushstroke. Ilara Vanni sat quietly in the sprawling studio of the Art Academy, the afternoon's waning light casting long, wavering shadows across the aged wooden floor. The scent of oil paint and turpentine lingered in the air, mingling with the faint hum of distant conversation from the corridors. She was alone with her canvas, The figure she was painting frozen in a moment of stillness, yet something about the portrait felt wrong. As she brushed a delicate stroke along the cheekbone, her eyes caught an almost imperceptible change in the painted gaze. The eyes of her subject, the young man who had sat before her that morning, seemed to flicker, shifting with a subtle life of their own. A chill crept down Alara's spine. She blinked rapidly, questioning her senses. Was it the exhaustion, the lingering unease since the first disappearance had come to light? But no one else, she was certain, noticed this strange flicker. She leaned closer, her breath shallow, tracing the contours of the face on the canvas. The eyes held a secret, an emotion that transcended mere likeness. They whispered of fear, of memories trapped beneath the surface, as if the portrait was less a painting than a vessel capturing something beyond the visible. Her thoughts were interrupted by muted voices drifting through the open studio door. Alara's gaze shifted, catching movement in the corridor outside. She rose cautiously, moving toward the sound. The hallway was dim, the ancient stone walls absorbing the low murmur of conversation. She edged closer to the corner, careful to remain unseen. 2 students stood in the shadows, their faces partially obscured but tense. "It's not just rumors anymore," one whispered, voice taut with anxiety. Another one vanished last night. The administration's silence is deafening. "You think the portraits have something to do with it?" the other asked, a note of disbelief undercutting the fear. "I don't know what I think," the first replied. "But there's a darkness here. Something the director won't let us see." Alara's heart quickened. She pressed back into the safety of the studio, the echo of their words burning in her mind. The academy was a place of beauty and art, yes, but beneath its polished surface ran currents of secrecy and dread. Later that day, during a break between classes, Alara found herself face to face with Julia Santoro. The other students' sharp eyes sized her up with a mixture of challenge and disdain. "You were getting too close," Julia said softly, her voice a razor's edge wrapped in silk. "Some things are better left alone." Alara met the gaze unwaveringly. "I want to understand, don't you?" Julia's lips twitched into a brief, knowing smile. "Be careful what you seek. The academy doesn't forgive those who pry too deep." The warning hung in the air long after Julia walked away, leaving Alara with a swirl of questions and a tightening knot of resolve. That evening, Alara sat in her modest dorm room, the flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Her latest sketches lay spread before her, each line infused with an intensity she had not intended. The faces she drew no longer seemed mere images. They carried a weight of memory, emotion, and something darker, an echo of the vanished. She traced a finger over one sketch, feeling the pulse of trapped stories beneath the paper. The academy's beauty was an illusion, a delicate veil stretched over a profound and unsettling truth. And Alara was caught in its weave, the shadows behind the canvas pulling her ever deeper. As midnight approached, a sudden noise from the corridor jolted her from her thoughts, a soft but urgent knock at the door. Her breath caught. Who could it be at this hour? With a tentative hand, she opened the door just enough to glimpse a familiar figure, Sophia Moretti, her face pale and eyes wide with unspoken fear. "Alara," Sophia whispered urgently, "there's something you need to see. It's about the disappearances." The night had only just begun, and the shadows behind the canvas were closing in fast. The mystery was no longer distant. It was alive, demanding to be uncovered, no matter the cost. The flickering candlelight danced as Alara closed the door behind Sophia, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on her shoulders. Somewhere in the depths of the academy, secrets waited silent, watchful, and deadly, and Alara was determined to bring them into the light. Alara found herself retreating to the academy's courtyard more often these days, seeking solace in the dappled sunlight and quiet corners away from the bustling studios and watchful eyes of professors and fellow students. It was here, beneath the ancient stone arches wrapped in ivy, that she could sketch without interruption, and where she had chosen to confide in Sophia Moretti. Sophia was unlike anyone Alara had met since arriving at the academy. Warm and pragmatic, fiercely loyal, she had a way of grounding Alara's swirling anxieties with a steady presence and sharp wit. Today, Alara sat cross-legged on the cold stone bench, her charcoal pencil moving hesitantly across the rough paper, capturing the flicker of light in Sophia's bright eyes and the subtle curve of her determined smile. "Are you sure you want to talk about this now?" Sophia asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper, mindful of the prying ears that seemed to lurk in every shadow at the academy. Alara hesitated, the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest. "I can't keep it to myself anymore. The disappearances, they were real. And I think they reconnected to the portraits." Sophia's eyebrows knit together in concern, but she nodded. "I've heard the rumors, but you were the first to say it out loud. It's frightening." Alara's gaze dropped to the sketch. "I don't know what's happening, but every person I paint they vanish. It's like the painting traps them, or something worse." Sophia reached out, touching Alara's hand with reassurance. "We'll figure this out, together." As the days passed, Sophia's skepticism began to waver. One evening, after a long day of sculpting, she found herself wandering the academy's labyrinthine halls alone. The flickering candlelight casting strange shadows on the faded frescoes overhead. The silence was heavy, interrupted only by the faint echo of her footsteps. A sudden creak made her heart leap. A door down the corridor swung open slowly, revealing a darkened room. She squinted into the gloom, but saw only shifting shadows. When she stepped closer, the door slammed shut with a sharp bang, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. Returning to her studio, Sophia found Alara waiting, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "I saw something tonight," Sophia confessed, her voice trembling. "I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just my imagination." Their shared experiences forged a deeper bond, a fragile alliance against the unseen forces at play within the academy's walls. Meanwhile, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Julia Santoro, a rival artist known for her sharp tongue and competitive edge, seemed to grow more hostile toward Alara. Their encounters crackled with unspoken challenges, Julia's piercing gaze a constant reminder of the academy's cutthroat nature. "Don't let her get to you," Sophia advised one afternoon as they packed their art supplies after class. "Julia's just scared someone might outshine her." Alara forced a small smile, but felt the weight of isolation pressing in. The academy was a place of beauty and brilliance, but also shadows and secrets. In the sculpture studio, Sophia confided her own suspicions about the administration. She had noticed whispered conversations, hurried meetings behind closed doors, and subtle hints of corruption that might explain the strange disappearances. "I think there's more at stake here than just art," Sophia said, her tone low and urgent. "We need to be careful, but we can't turn away." Alara nodded, her resolve hardening. Together they would unravel the academy's mysteries, no matter the cost. As night fell on Rome, the city's ancient stones glowing under a silver moon, Alara lay awake in her dormitory, the faces of her vanished subjects haunting her dreams. The line between reality and illusion blurred, but with Sophia by her side, she felt a flicker of hope. The journey ahead was perilous, but the truth was a canvas waiting to be painted, and Alara was determined to reveal every hidden stroke, every shadow beneath the surface. But as the wind whispered through the cracks in the academy's walls, a question lingered in the air. How much of the truth was Alara ready to face before it consumed her? Alara Vanni's footsteps echoed softly against the polished marble floors of the academy's sculpture wing, a place usually alive with the rhythmic tapping of chisels and the low murmur of focused students. Today, however, the studio was almost deserted, draped in a pall of uneasy silence that seemed to press against the walls like a living thing. Sophia Moretti, her auburn curls pulled back in a loose knot, was already there, crouched near a shadowed corner where a section of the floorboard had been pried up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sifted through a tangle of aged papers and yellowed documents. "Sophia," Alara's voice was cautious, barely above a whisper, Sophia looked up, her bright eyes sharp despite the fatigue etched into her face. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice low but urgent. "There are financial records here, irregular entries, payments made to unknown accounts, and meetings that don't appear in any official academy logs." Alara knelt beside her, the weight of the discovery settling over her like a cold stone. "Do you think it's connected to the disappearances?" Sophia nodded slowly. "It has to be. Someone's covering up something, maybe even orchestrating it." The room felt colder suddenly, the dust motes swirling in the thin shafts of light highlighting the secret they'd uncovered. Alara's mind raced, not only with the implications of Sophia's findings, but also with a growing, gnawing fear that her paintings might be more than simple portraits. Each brushstroke seemed to carry a burden, as if the faces she brought to life on canvas were capturing souls, trapping them inside these frames of painted illusion. Back in her dormitory, Alara sat before her easel, the half-finished portrait staring back at her. The subject's eyes seemed to shimmer with a life that unsettled her, as if they were silently pleading or warning. Her hand shook as she dipped the brush into the muted ochre, hesitant to continue. The flickering candlelight cast restless shadows across the canvas, making the painted features appear to shift subtly. Was it just her imagination, or was there something unnatural at work? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. It was Julia Santoro, her rival, standing with a smug smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Still wasting time on those gloomy portraits, Alara." Julia's voice was cool, edged with derision. "Maybe if you focused more on technique and less on your little nightmares, you'd actually get somewhere." Alara felt a flush of anger rise but forced herself to remain calm. "It's not about technique," she said quietly. "There's something wrong here, something you don't want to see." Julia's smile tightened. "I see plenty, and I suggest you stop chasing shadows before you get lost in them." The tension between them crackled in the air, a fragile barrier of rivalry that had grown sharper with each passing day. Julia's ambition was a constant challenge, pushing Alara to her limits, but also isolating her further. Later, as twilight deepened over Rome, Alara and Sophia met in a small cafe just off Via del Corso. The warm glow of lanterns and the rich aroma of espresso provided a brief sanctuary from the Academy's mounting darkness. "We're onto something, Alara," Sophia said, her voice steady but laced with worry. "But we need to be careful. Whoever's behind this has power, and they're not afraid to use it." Alara nodded, her fingers tightening around the cup. "I'm scared. Not just for me, but for all of them, the missing students. I feel like my paintings, they reap part of it. Like I'm holding pieces of their souls in my brush." Sophia reached across the table, her hand steadying Alara's. "We'll figure it out. Together." The night outside deepened, shadows lengthening as the city's ancient stones whispered secrets of beauty, illusion, and danger. Within the walls of the Academy, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the next move. As Alara left the cafe, the cold night air filled her lungs, stealing her resolve. She knew the path ahead was fraught with peril, but the truth was a canvas she had to complete no matter the cost. The rivalry with Julia was no longer just about art. It had become a battle for survival and understanding, and Alara was determined not to lose. And somewhere in the silent corridors of the Academy, a shadow stirred, watching her every step. The day had waned into a soft, melancholy dusk when Alara made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Art Academy, the echo of her footsteps mingling with the distant murmur of late classes ending. The air was thick with the scent of aged stone and faint traces of oil paint, a sensory reminder of the Academy's long history. She clutched her sketchbook tightly, heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Today, she was to meet Matteo Rinaldi, the Academy's reclusive art historian, a man whispered about among students but seldom encountered. Alara found Matteo in a cramped office-lined floor to ceiling with dusty books and brittle scrolls. His thin frame was hunched over a cluttered desk, glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his pale nose. His eyes, sharp and reflective, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and guarded caution. "You wish to understand the disappearances," he said quietly, voice low and measured. "The Academy holds many secrets, some best left buried. But you seem different, Ilara. You see beyond the surface." She nodded, swallowing her unease. "I've seen the rumors, the missing students. I need to know the truth." Matteo hesitated, then rose and motioned for her to follow. They descended a narrow spiral staircase, the walls closing in around them. At the base lay the archive, a cavernous chamber filled with the scent of mold and forgotten time. Rows of ancient wooden shelves groaned under the weight of countless tomes, some bound in cracked leather, others in faded vellum. "These archives contain the Academy's unwelcome history," Matteo explained, pulling back a heavy velvet curtain to reveal a concealed door. "Not all who enter here return unchanged." Ilara's pulse quickened as they entered the secret room. Candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the cracked plaster walls. She ran her fingers along the spines of books and stacks of yellowed papers, each bearing witness to decades if not centuries of artistic pursuit shadowed by darker forces. Matteo produced a fragile leather-bound journal, worn by time and use. Its pages were inscribed with cryptic symbols and meticulous notes detailing rituals and practices aimed at preserving beauty and memory beyond natural limits. As he spoke, his voice dropped to a whisper. The Academy's founders sought to bind the essence of their subjects, not merely to capture likeness, but to imprison their very souls. The price was steep, and the cost still echoes in these halls. Ilara's breath caught, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to coalesce into a chilling picture. She traced a faded photograph of a young woman whose eyes seemed almost too vivid, as though alive beneath the paper's surface. "Are these the students who disappeared?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Matteo confirmed, "their images preserved, their presence denied to the world beyond these portraits." The weight of the revelation settled heavily upon her. Yet, even as she absorbed the grim truth, a flicker of doubt stirred. Matteo's gaze held a depth she couldn't decipher. Was it sympathy, or something more inscrutable? Their exploration was interrupted suddenly by a faint knock at the archive's entrance. Matteo's eyes narrowed. "We must be cautious," he warned. "Some truths invite danger." Ilara nodded, determination hardening within her. This hidden knowledge was a double-edged sword, both a beacon and a trap. As they ascended back into the Academy's dimming halls, Ilara's mind raced. The lines between ally and adversary blurred in the flickering candlelight. Yet, one thing was clear, her journey into the Academy's shadowed history had only just begun, and the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. With every step, the whispers of the past seemed to echo louder, and the portrait she painted of reality grew more fragile and uncertain. But Ilara was resolved to pierce the veil, no matter the cost. The heavy door of the archive closed behind her with a resonant thud, sealing away the secrets once more, but not for long. The heart of the mystery beat fiercely within her, urging her onward into the unknown. What lay ahead would test not only her skill as an artist, but the very essence of her courage and identity. The studio was cloaked in shadows, the late afternoon light waning behind stained glass windows that cast fractured patterns onto the mottled wooden floor. Ilara sat rigid on a tall stool, brush poised hesitantly above the canvas. Her latest portrait stared back at her, an uncanny likeness of a fellow student. But something was wrong. The eyes shifted subtly, the irises seeming to catch and reflect the dim light as if alive. A chill prickled her skin. She blinked rapidly, willing the illusion away, but the unsettling sensation persisted. It was as if the painted gaze followed her every movement, watching, waiting. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled, smudging a streak of dark paint across the cheek, yet when she blinked again, the eyes seemed to sharpen, focusing more intently. "It's just paint," she whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow. The air in the studio thickened, heavy with a silence that pressed down on her chest. The boundary between the painted world and her own felt fragile, dangerously thin. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. The portraits she had completed in recent weeks haunted her dreams, their features twisting and shifting, revealing emotions unspoken: fear, sorrow, even anger. It was as if the faces held secrets too heavy to bear, imprinted not only on canvas, but on the very air around her. The next day, tensions simmered beneath the Academy's polished surface. Alara's rivalry with Julia Santoro, a fiercely competitive student with a sharp tongue, reached a boiling point. In the narrow corridor lined with classical sculptures and fading frescoes, their confrontation erupted. "You rechasing ghosts, Alara," Julia snapped, her auburn curls bouncing as she stepped close. "Maybe it's your own mind playing tricks. Portraits aren't magic, they were craft." Alara's dark eyes flashed, the frustration she'd bottled up spilling forth. "I see what others don't. These portraits, they read different. Something's wrong here. Or maybe you were losing your grip," Julia retorted, voice low but biting. "Not everyone here is as fragile as you think." The sharp exchange left Alara shaken but resolute. The Academy was a crucible of talent and secrets, and she refused to be cowed. That night, she returned to her cramped dorm room, walls lined with sketches and half-finished paintings. Under the flickering glow of a single desk lamp, Alara sifted through her past work. At first, the images seemed innocent portraits of friends and strangers, studies in light and shadow. But as she studied them more closely, a creeping disquiet settled in. Faces appeared to warp subtly. Smiles flickered into grimaces, eyes darkened or brightened unpredictably. It was as if the paintings remembered more than she intended, memories trapped beneath layers of oil and pigment. A cold shudder ran down her spine. Was the art capturing the soul, or was her mind bending reality to fill the void? Sleep evaded her, replaced by an obsessive need to understand. She sketched feverishly, trying to capture the flickering illusions, each stroke an attempt to anchor the shifting truths. Yet the more she painted, the more blurred her own sense of self became. In the quiet moments before dawn, Alara found herself drawn to the cracked mirror hanging crookedly on her wall. Her reflection fractured, multiplied by the damaged glass. The girl staring back was haunted, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination, lips pressed tight. "Who am I, really?" she murmured, voice barely audible. The question echoed endlessly. The portrait studio awaited in the morning light, the painted faces watching. Alara knew she was on the edge between reality and illusion, memory and forgetting. Somewhere in that fragile divide lay the truth she sought, but at what cost? And as the Academy's ancient stones whispered secrets long buried, Alara's journey into the heart of darkness was only beginning.